Of course, tomorrow is the 20th anniversary of 9/11. I know that, basically we are just an extension of New York City, and so many former New Yorkers, I know through the years, we've had conversations about 9/11. Virginia and I were on the air that morning when it was going down.
It's crazy.
Yeah, what an interesting, just unbelievable day that I think we're on most of the day.
Do you remember when it went from this weird incident to, oh crap, this is a terror attack?
I remember it vividly. We were in the studio, and somebody had just mentioned, maybe it was even Virginia, or somebody came in and said, yeah, it sounds like a small commuter plane hit the World Trade Center, and there's a fire going on one of the upper floors. And we're like, oh, wow, okay.
We thought it was an accident.
Yeah.
Like a plane crash that had happened accidentally.
I'm like, how could that even happen? It's
and they
not
said
like
a small
that comes
plane.
Out of nowhere. Yeah.
Which was wrong.
So we had kind of a kitchen communal area, and we had about 4 or 5 radio studios, and most people were outside in that communal area. And we had 3. I remember they were even the old-looking TVs, not even the flat screens. They were the ones that had the big old tube in the back.
With the VCR thing underneath.
Yeah, right. That's how, we're talking 20 years. And so everybody was just standing around watching that. Virginia and I were both in the kitchen when the second plane slammed into the World Trade Center. And then everybody's like, oh, my gosh. And then that was just... You realize it flipped a switch, and at that point you realize that America was under attack, and then just the insanity of the Pentagon, and then the other plane that crashed and went down, and it just really is crazy. And talking to people, I think all of America is like, wow, we are under a massive attack. This is our Pearl Harbor.
I was in the middle of a job interview at a golf course, and this one kid runs out to the boss that was showing me around the golf course, because the World Trade Center just got hit by a plane. He's like, oh, that's weird. And then he kept on talking to me about the job.
So let's talk more about what you know about golf, kid.
Well, then he goes, no, you don't understand. A second plane hit. They think it's a terror attack. And the guy goes, oh, wow. So what you want to do, Jason, the balls need to go right here.
When you clean the balls.
Like it was no big deal. I'm like,
terror attack got nothing to do with the golf course.
Dude, this is kind of important.
And he went on with the job interview.
How bizarre.
I didn't get that job.
Throughout South Florida, there's going to be a lot of great observations for the 20th anniversary. You can find one in a town near you. They are everywhere, and the list is too long to mention every single one. But one event that is really amazing is the Stephen Siller Tunnel to Towers Fort Lauderdale 5K going at Hyzenga Plaza in Fort Lauderdale tomorrow morning. It is named after a New York City firefighter. He was done with his shift, and I think he's father of 5, and he got the call on the radio that what was going down at the World Trade Center, grabbed his gear and took off running back into it.
Wow.
And they got him there, and he was never seen from again. And so that just really is the kind of bravery and what those firefighters went through in New York City. A lot of them just like, hey, we're not coming out of this, man. Charge full speed ahead, and just the bravery and unbelievable nature of that. And now I saw a story on the news this morning of a kid whose dad was killed in he was a firefighter, and the kid now works at the same fire station. He looks exactly like his dad. They had side-by-side photos, and his whole life is just a tribute to his father who gave his own life on that day.
It's beautiful.
So it really is. And so I know it's 20 years out for some people, they may not even be able to remember. And it really was a day that changed America forever. You notice a lot of things that they do now. We entered into wars. Going to the airport is a much different experience. It really just changed what you thought about life and about people. And I know a lot of our listeners may be too young to really remember it, but anybody who was alive during that time just knows what it was like. And if you weren't in South Florida, remember the conversations we had. I remember my roommate at the time, Chachi, his mom lived right below the terrace because they trained and lived right here in South Florida before doing the terrible things that they did.
Yeah, they went to pilot school here.
In Lantana.
Yeah.
What blew my mind was I walked by that building every single day for a baseball camp. That same building that they were living in.
Yeah.
I walked by it every day. That's where they found out they lived at.
And I remember we were talking, I remember vividly the conversation talking to my roommate's mom, and she was just saying, yeah, like at 10 p.m., they were making noises. It was like they were doing some construction projects or something up there.
Dang.
And it was just the smells and things like that were coming out of there. And, she didn't think a whole lot about it. And that really was it. Then you could never take your mind to the horror that they unleashed on America on that day. And it still is unfathomable to even just think of what it was. And you see replayed over and over again, all the chaos that happened in New York City and the Pentagon.
Is there a new Netflix special coming out about 9/11?
They do have that, yes. In fact, before my flight last week, I was downloading it, and I'm like, wait, what am I doing?
Yeah.
Before I got on a plane.
Yes, I was like, no, let's watch this weekend.
It's like going on a boat watching Jaws.
Yeah, no, it was just not the right thing to download at that
Yeah,
time.
what
I'm
am
like,
I
what am I
doing?
doing? I had to stop myself. I do really want to see it. And this weekend, I'm going to be taking that moment because there were so many lives that were lost, lives that were changed, people that were left behind. The stories are crazy, and I do want to pay respects for that. And thankfully, all throughout South Florida, you've got so many different opportunities to observe what had happened. Even from different 5Ks that we have. You even go by fire stations. You go by the one that is right there on North Lake and Palm Beach Gardens, and they've got a part of the World Trade Center that is right out front of the fire station still to this day.
A lot of those pieces of the rubble have been turned into tributes all across this country and memorials. And it's beautiful that people are able to go there and touch that piece of steel and just remember and never forget all those lives.
Yeah, and if you are going to be in New York City or you're listening to us in New York City, the family members of the 9/11 victims are going to be gathering at the National September 11th Memorial Museum, and they're going to be reading aloud the names of those that were killed in the 9/11 attacks and in the 1993 World Trade Center bombing. So that's going to be like a whole day long event, I believe, starting at the time when the first plane hit the World Trade Center. It's going on there. And it's a beautiful plaza if you haven't been since they reconstructed it and what they did. Some of the stories still just are kind of crazy. In fact, we'd gotten an email. It came into mail at kvjshow.com of just, what people have done. And we've talked throughout the years of people that have crazy stories about people in their family. This one email said, my cousin Lori worked in the World Trade Center and was on the elevator when her building was hit. The doors opened at the lobby and a security guard said in a calm voice, there's a fire in the building and we're asking you to go outside. She walked towards the door, and when she pushed them open, the sound of chaos just rushed into her ears like she'd never heard before. My family then didn't hear from her for 18 hours.
Wow.
While the cell phone towers were jammed. She just wound up walking back to her home in Hoboken, New Jersey. And we've heard so many stories of people that couldn't get to cars, couldn't get the mass transit, couldn't do anything that, and a lot of times if you don't know, if you work in that part of Manhattan, downtown like that, you typically didn't live in downtown. And
lots of people did that. They walked to Jersey. They walked to Queens. They walked. Like, it was just crazy because nobody could get back home and you couldn't call anybody.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. There's another story that somebody texted us about Stephen. He was trapped for 3 days before being pulled out of the rubble and taken to the hospital, and nobody even knew who he was. And for days, everybody thought that he was one of the victims. And then finally, he was able to utter his name in the hospital. Like, wait, what is your name? What is your name? And they got it. And they're like, okay, we need to find his family.
Wow.
So can you imagine for 3 days after what was going on and what it was like? So
that's one of those stories. The family's always holding on to hope.
Yeah.
But wow, for Stephen, their family actually got that call.
Yeah, just some absolutely amazing things. So just stories that are just beyond that. And like I said, if you're too young to know it, it's definitely something to know because, you and I were too young, Virginia and Jaybird, to know about JFK, but it's something you should know. Pearl Harbor, same thing. Some of the things that has been a part of America's history. And it is one of those tentpole type moments in American history that 50 years from now, 100 years from now, I imagine still will be talked about. And the victims and the families that were left behind will be remembered.